Welcome to Rick Rack Ruby. I'm Laura Cluvo. Today we will be making this felt angel Christmas ornament from a vintage Vogue pattern. She's fun and easy, so let's get started. To make the felt angel, we'll start with the pattern. This pattern is a vintage Vogue 1542 Santa Pack 4. Inside are the tissue paper, patterns, and the instruction sheets, and there are also some transfers. The angel looks like this, the instructions. This is on page 4 of the pattern. And then the tissue paper patterns for this design, there's an angel, body, wings, and the dress. And then the rest of these pieces I cut out with my sticker paper transfer method. These are iron-on transfers. There's ribbons and hands and feet and trim. There's also a face and some cheeks. So I iron this onto a piece of sticker paper, and I know it's kind of faint. Let's see. I hope you can see that. These are the hands. And then I use these as patterns. I just stick them to the felt and cut them out that way. I feel like it gives me a little bit more precision, which is important on little things like toes and thumbs and little bits like that. Here's an example of a piece that I cut out with the sticker paper. So I can just peel it off, and I can use these up to 3 times. And there is my pattern for the trim on the skirt. You probably noticed that I had removed the face transfer from this piece, and then I transferred the markings for the face directly onto the felt. So there's a faint blue outline of the face, which I will embroider. I'm going to start with the eyes. To embroider the eyes, I'm using 2 strands of black floss. The pattern actually directs us to stitch the mouth with black floss as well, but that doesn't really appeal to me. If this is too faint, I'll sometimes go over it with a disappearing marker, but this one I can see pretty well. I also fused some iron-on interfacing to the back of this piece just to give it a little more opacity so that these thread ends don't show through to the front. I'll do that long stitch first, and then for the individual lashes, just going to kind of follow them. There's the first one on the end. And then the second one, I'm going to carefully sort of dip this down a little bit so that the angel gives the appearance of having closed eyes. And then the third one, also I'm going to kind of pull this down a little bit like that. And then the fourth one is on the end. It just goes right to the tip there. That looks pretty good. So I'll secure this on the back. And I'm going to add a smudge of glue when I'm done to hold these ends in the back. So I'm not too concerned about knotting them off with some gigantic knot. Now I'll show you again. Maybe I'll go in this direction. I'm not sure. Oh, I think that's the same direction I went before. Okay, so just at the end of that long line, and then over here, and then I'm just going to do this exact little lash on the end right along the line, and then for the second and third, I'll pull this down a little bit so that that long stitch kind of dips down. Doesn't have to be perfect, but when I'm done, I look at it and if I hate it, I will do it over. I think that's fine. I actually like that one a little better. And then once again, I'll secure this on the back. I have this layer of iron-on interfacing, and I'm not too concerned about kind of poking through that layer. And of course, I'm also using nice wool felt, so I'm not super concerned about anything showing through. But like I say, when I'm done with all of the embroidery, I will be just kind of smudging it with a touch of glue. Now these are the cheeks. I want to get the cheeks on next so that I know exactly how much room I have for the mouth. I'm going to add a smudge of just glue stick to the back side of each felt circle. I cut these circles out with my die cutting machine, and they're a tiny bit bigger than the pattern, but I kind of like them bigger. I'm going to thread my needle now with 2 strands of pink floss. I got a pink that kind of matches that, that felt. Now I'm just going to do 3 stitches across these circles, just to secure something like that. Boop, boop, boop. They don't have to be perfect. And honestly, I don't really draw them. I just wanted to give you an indication of where I was going. I don't stitch through the felt circle, I sort of stitch around it. They don't have to be perfect. I want to be sure I have enough of an edge on the outside of the cheeks for a seam allowance. I don't put them too far out. So there's one cheek, and I'll secure this on the back. And then I'll do the second one. I'm not trying to, you know, get the stitches exactly the same. In fact, I like it better if they're just a little bit different. One, two, three, nothing to it. And I'll secure that on the back. Now for the mouth, in the front of the pattern, you can see that the mouth is actually worked in black embroidery. And I wasn't crazy about that black. I did a mouth with this pink floss, and I didn't think that it had enough contrast. So I'm gonna go for red. I use 2 strands of red and embroider the mouth. For the mouth, I'll do a satin stitch just right across, up and down to cover that circle. And then I'm gonna add a couple extra stitches to give her a little extra personality. I'm just filling it in with side-by-side stitches. Okay, there's my circle, which is fine, but I really wanted this angel to have a little more personality, so I want to make her have a little smile, kind of like that. That's the first step. Just one single stitch. I thought about taking it over the cheek, but I think that might be too clownish. So I'm just going to do a little stitch on this side, just a little tilt to look like she's smiling, and then a similar stitch on this side. That looks cute. And then finally, I'm going to add a fly stitch. to the center of the mouth. So it's like this. So it's, so here's the mouth, and then here's the smile part. And then what you want is a loose stitch over the circle, and then catch it right here and pull it down. So it's like a Y, like this. So it's 2 stitches, out, in, don't pull it too tight, and then come back out here and then in to catch this, to add a little bit of a dip to the mouth. So I'm coming out right here, and then I'll reinsert my needle here, and then back here, that looks about right. I think that looks right. So I'm catching that loop to give it a little kissy look, I guess, and then down to the bottom, straight down. That looks good. That's a cute little mouth. So I'll secure this on the back, and then I'm just going to add a little smudge of glue to the back of each of these features. Let me show you the mouth again. Let's see. Now here are the front and the back and 2 feet. The instructions tell us to just sort of sandwich everything together like this, and then to blanket stitch all the way around. And that worked fine, but I found that the body was a little bit too big for the dress. It kind of showed at the bottom there, and so what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to sew these, you know, traditionally, right sides together with a very small seam allowance. I'll leave an opening in the side here, that won't show, and turn it right side out and stuff it. I haven't done that yet. I'm just, you know, this is the first time I'm trying it, but I'm hoping that, you know, the result will be a smooth outline. The feet will poke right out, and then this will be a little bit smaller all the way around, so that when I add the skirt that you're not seeing this bit. Also, I can see a little bit of the transfer still on the very edge of the face, and so that will be disguised inside, hopefully, inside the seam allowance. I've sewn around the edge, and I'm going to clip a little bit into these seam allowances and turn it right side out and stuff it. Here's how she looks turned. Her little feet just popped right out. They're so cute. And I managed to avoid stitching through the cheeks. I think I could have trimmed a little bit of the seam allowance around the face, but I'm not too concerned because that's all covered with hair. So now I'll stuff it, and then I'm going to stitch up this opening by hand. It's going to be covered by the dress, so I'm not going to try to get it too perfect. It doesn't have to be like invisible. Well, I'm already liking the way that this dress fits. So I'm just going to put that aside and move forward. The next thing is to add this trim. So the trim goes about like that, and I'm going to use a blanket stitch, a machine blanket stitch in this fuchsia color to secure this trim to the dress. The trim is lined up along the edge of the dress, and you can see that it fits perfectly well as long as you align the edges. Here's the dress. This little machine blanket stitch turned out great, but if your machine doesn't have these decorative stitches, don't worry. You can use a straight stitch, you can do hand embroidery, or you can just glue it down. You don't have to do it exactly like this. The next step is to add 1 inch wide gathered eyelet trim along the inside hem so that it just peeks out. And I feel like the last one that I made, which I used this exact trim, it didn't show enough. And so I think I'm going to move it as low as I can. What I want is to put this low enough that when I stitch it, I'm going to stitch it by hand, it will be within the boundaries of this trim so that I can just kind of lazily stitch it and not worry about the stitches coming through to the front. So I will place this, pin this, and then hand stitch it here, making sure that you can actually see the edge of the eyelet. Okay, here is my skirt. It's all prepped with the eyelet peeking out, and I just want you to know what I meant by stitching it. I have a single strand of white quilting thread, and I'm just going to stitch the header of the eyelet through the skirt. But as I stitch through, I'm making sure I'm holding my finger here, that I'm not stitching through to the absolute front. I'm just stitching through that orange layer. Let's see, boop. I'm doing big stitches. It doesn't have to be super fine. So down through the orange and up through the eyelet edge. Down through the orange and up through the eyelet edge. And like I say, my finger is here so I can make sure that I'm not poking through to the front. And then I'm just going to work all the way down. Now we're going to embellish the dress a little bit more with these ribbons. Here I'm showing you how I use these stickers to, and by the way, specifically these ribbons wouldn't be that hard just to cut out, you know, without the sticker method. But some of these tiny, small little toes on the feet, and some of those would be a little bit challenging to cut out with a pattern, because it's hard to get it to, you know, to really stick. So these ribbons, now I don't know if I want them the exact same length. Okay, they go in the center. I'm standing up now. Does my voice sound different? So this is the center right here. And then place this one here and this one here. That looks good. Kind of an X. The streamers don't have to be, you know, all the same length. In fact, I think I want the inner ones to be a little bit longer. Like that. Okay. That looks good. And now I'm going to add a couple of stitches to secure this. In the end, there will be some holly berries, which I'm using little pompoms that will cover these stitches, so I'm not concerned about the thread being white. That's just what was in in my needle from sewing the eyelet. I feel like that's pretty secure. So I'll secure it on the back. And then there are these little hands. I definitely want to get the hands glued on so that the glue will dry before I sew the dress together. Here's one hand. The hands go like this, with the thumbs to the inside. See, this has a little sticker on it too. The thumbs to the inside, and then this edge, if you can kind of tuck it under one of the ribbons, and they don't have to be exactly right. This one could be a little tilted or whatever. They don't have to be completely symmetric, but I like to spread white glue on the back of the hands and then let the glue dry before we move on. I had a student over. We were doing a lot of gluing and the glue wasn't coming out fast enough. So I nipped this really short right here, and now the glue just runs out. There's one hand. Doesn't that look so bright and cheerful? I love those colors. Okay, while I'm waiting for that to dry, I'm going to sew the wings. I will use the machine embroidery around the edge, and I'll leave an opening probably right here, and then stuff it and then stitch it up. But first I have to wash my hands. Here are the wings stuffed and ready to go. I sewed up the opening. I left an opening right here and then sewed that up. Here's the dress. I did a little 1/4 inch seam allowance and I left it open at the top. And I will turn it right side out. I'm fairly certain that this is enough room to pull the head through. There she is, great. I think I'm gonna add, I wanna make sure the dress is long enough to cover up this little body. The last one that I made, I just couldn't get it long enough to cover that, and I don't like the way it looks. Also, the petticoat wasn't long enough. And also, her mouth, there's not enough contrast between the skin and the lips. So I think I'm gonna like this one a lot more. Yeah, so I'm pulling this down to make sure the petticoat is long enough. And then right here, I'm going to sew these edges together, although they will be covered by the wings later on. I just wanna make sure that this doesn't come undone later. So I'll sew that up, and while I'm sewing it up, I'm also gonna tack it to the body. I think that's gonna help the dress stay on and down. Also, I think I might touch up the edges of the streamers to meet the edges of the wrists. So a little bit of glue here and here to secure those. That'll be good. Then we'll do the hair. Now the instructions for the hair, the first time I made it, I followed the instructions exactly, and they call for us to count out 10 9.5 inch lengths of yarn and then to sew them along like the part, and then kind of tie them up in the back and then add another piece for the top. And it was all just very, very not fun. If you've ever made a rag doll and had to stitch all those hanks of yarn, that's what it was like, and it just wasn't worth it. So we're gonna do the Rick Rack Ruby index card method, and we're gonna do a little top knot. For the hair, I'm going to use this yellow, inexpensive acrylic yarn. I have 3 4x6 inch index cards. I'm going to wrap the cards the long way. And I know that I need to get at least 30 wraps. I need to count 4. And it's important to go all the way across the card. This is not a project where you can just go this far. You need to wrap the whole thing. I've sewn across the center of my cards, and I'm just gonna flip it back and forth a couple of times along the seam to loosen it up, and then carefully remove the card. Okay, so here's the wig, I call this the wig, removed from the index card. And here's my angel. And what I wanna do, I'm going to take a disappearing ink marker, and I'm just gonna sort of draw a hairline here above her eyes, and then down below the cheeks, all the way down to here, and then around the back of the neck, and then, you know, the same for the other side. It's kind of hard to tell where you're sewing when you're sewing the wig on, and so it helps to have a little guideline. And I have a nice long piece of doubled thread, and I have a thimble. I like to use a thimble. The idea is that the seam of this hair, the wig, the center goes to the top center of her forehead. So the center of this wig right here will be stitched right to her forehead. And then down along the cheeks and then around to the back of the neck on this side. And the same thing on this side. Down along here, along the cheeks, and to the bottom. And they meet perfectly right there in the middle. If you're brave, you could try hot gluing this, but I just don't want to risk it. Knowing myself, I would make a big mess of it. So I'm just going to stitch it. I'll start right here. And I'm just going to sort of, it's almost like a back stitch. Stitch forward and back. And then as I come around to the front of the face, I'm going to be checking with every stitch to be certain that I'm stitching right along my purple line there. Just kind of try to keep the seam exposed so I can see where I'm going. It doesn't need to be perfect. No one will ever see these stitches. Just along like that. So here is how her hair looks right now, but of course we're going to pull it up into a top knot. There we go. I have a double strand of yellow thread here, which I will tie off. And my purple mark, it will disappear. I can see a little bit of it right there. Then I'm going to use my needle and go through a couple of times just to make sure this is nice and secure. I'm not going to do anything to arrange the hair, but if you wanted to, you could make sure all the loops are pulled out and everything's nice and smooth. I kind of like it a little wonky. Okay, now we're making progress. I'm going to say that we are in the home stretch. So before I forget, I'm going to add my hanging loop. I'm sewing this through and I'm making sure that it actually goes through the head, not just through the yarn or through the hair. I can tell I went through the head. Nothing to it. And then for a halo, I'm going to use a wire. This is 20 gauge gold wire. Cut off about 6 or 7 inches. That's probably too long. Then I'm going to fold it over, twist it like this, and then bend this little stem up. And then I can tell this is too long. So I'm going to trim this off to about maybe 3/4 of an inch for the stem. If you've never seen this before, it's like dyeing an Easter egg, one of those little Easter egg holders. I'm going to put some hot glue right here and then press it into the top of the hair. Right into the center. So that the loops come through the halo. Great. Now the instructions call for you to cut a strip of red felt and then tie the felt into a bow and add a bow here. But of course, I'm going to use a pre-tied bow. Here we go. I will use one of these Petites dimensional stickers. Add a little bit of glue. And then just press that right into her hairstyle right there. That looks good. And then finally, we're going to add the wings. Oh no, and also the little pom-pom berries. Have to do that too. I'll add them first. I'm using 7mm red pom-poms. I'm going to use 3 of them. And then the instructions do call for you to make the berries from strips of red felt, which I did in one of these projects. But honestly, I just prefer the pom-poms, and I started using pom-poms on on these designs, and now I just want to be consistent. So I'm going to add some glue right here so it hits all three of those. Then I'm going to put it right over those stitches. There we go. Now I'm going to sew this by hand. So I'll put some white thread in my needle and I'm going to show you how I tack it. I'm just going to sew like about 1/2 inch on either side of this little groove here. So let's just say we'll start right here. And I'm trying to match up my stitches to that edge of the embroidery, the decorative stitches. So I'm just going to try to go right there. And then I'm securing it through to the body. I'm making sure that I dig down into the stuffing. So I'm not just sewing this to the dress, but I'm actually sewing it all the way through. About 1/2 inch on either side of the seam here, or the groove in the wings. I'm going to go over and then I'll go back. It doesn't have to be super neat. They don't show very much, so I'm not very concerned about keeping it neat. See, I'm just getting them right into the line of stitches. Let's see. That looks good. Now I'll knot off my thread and I'll start again for the top. I'm stitching through the head. And I don't think there's really any secret to it except that, you know, don't just sew through the hair. Oh, and don't let the loops of yarn get caught in the stitches. There we go. That is nice and secure. And those wings are very plump and very cute. All right, I'm going to secure this thread. And we're done. Here's her front, her side, her back. Thank you for watching my tutorial. If you're enjoying my videos, please like, share, and subscribe.